We're in a series called Faith at Work. Welcome to Coast Vineyard. We are this fall looking at how does following Jesus, how does God's original design for work connect with our working lives, with the understanding that many of us spend the great majority of our weeks in work context. Certainly not all of us, but whether your work is in a home, whether you are retired and serving and pursuing other sorts of things than salary work, all of us, we are designed to work. Most of us work for most of our lives in some capacity or another. So we're looking at faith at work. This morning, we're going to look at the shadow side of work. Two book recommendations. One is by Tim Keller, Every Good Endeavor. I think it's Tim Keller's best book, and he has a number of good books, but this one is really outstanding. If you're at all interested in exploring faith in the workplace, high recommendation for that book. And this morning, full disclosure, you'll see in the outline, I've just stolen just unabashedly from Keller some of the points. And in this case, it's really unabashedly. He's done great work, and so you'll see that bleeding into the message. And then Kingdom Calling by Amy Sherman is a great book, Vocational Stewardship for the Common Good. It's a little bit of a deeper dive, and so I would probably start with Tim Keller, but if you want a deeper dive on the same topic from the same kind of framework, Amy Sherman is great. And that book is new and just making the rounds sort of out in the faith and work conversation. So check those out. Let's see. And June, Crisaldo, why don't you come on up? We often have been starting with testimonies. And this morning, I want to start with June. I'm just going to say real quick, it's my wife's birthday. She's not in here, but we're not going to sing to her. But happy birthday to my wife. That's totally, so I don't know how that fits into a message series, but I just was about to say it, and now I said it. So there we go. One of the things we want to do, we have been working really for the last year of having just more stories from the congregation up front. And through this series, you're going to hear a lot of stories from the workplace. We're going to have one Sunday that's entirely a conversation with people at Coast in the workplace. But this morning, thanks to June for coming on up and sharing a little bit about God in the workplace in terms of your life. June, just real quick, what do you do? Give us a brief snapshot of what is your work? What's your career?
Sure. Hi, my name is June. I work in the biotech industry as a field application scientist, or FAS for short. Now, a lot of you might be wondering, well, what does an FAS do? An FAS is essentially like a technical consultant for anyone in the life sciences sector who uses my company's products. So a lot of my clientele consists of biotech companies, pharma companies, academic labs, hospitals. In fact, if you guys know David Dimmick, his lab actually uses one of my company's robots. And my company also collaborates a lot with Illumina. So I think a lot of you are familiar with that company. So I travel a lot. Just a few weeks ago, I was in the state of Iowa for a week working with the US Department of Agriculture. They're figuring out how to efficiently extract DNA from lots of different crops, a lot of different animals. And weeks before that, I was at UCSF. Before that, I think I was in Arizona. I'm going to New York in a few weeks. So I travel a lot, and I work with a lot of different researchers and labs that are essentially changing the way we do healthcare, essentially.
Right on, including some cool intersectionality here at Coast with other careers. And how have you seen, just over the past few years, or even in this workplace, how have you seen God at work in your workplace?
I think how I see God at work, and essentially how I see God moving in the industry, sort of stems from my original desire to be in this industry in the first place. Now, really briefly, I'm not going to go into too many details, but when I was 9 years old, my mom was diagnosed with thyroid cancer. And that's a whole other story for another time. But by the time I was 11, God miraculously healed her, and the doctors were able to surgically remove a tumor that they originally thought to be malignant. And they were able to remove it, and now she is cancer-free. Now, that's not the answer to the question, but when I was 11, I prayed for the first time asking God to remove the cancer. And looking back at that moment, I realized that the way I prayed, that my desires to get rid of that cancer aligned with the values of the kingdom. And I could hear God telling me, when I would ask God to remove the cancer, I could hear him saying, I know, that's not a part of my kingdom. So when I look at my clientele and all the researchers that I work with, their desires to essentially better human health and increase human longevity, that is aligned with the values of the kingdom. And I see that when I pray for the industry and I pray for prosperity for it, I'm essentially advancing God's goals to essentially eradicate human disease. And that disease is not part of God's kingdom. So since we're advancing that, that is in line with that. And I see God doing that.
Super cool, June. And I would hope, just to riff on that just a little bit, I think there's a redemptive purpose for every type of work and every sphere of work. And one thing we want to have is just that sense of where does this career or sort of industry align with God's sort of kingdom trajectory. So that's great. And then just one last question, June. How do you see God actually transforming your workplace?
Sure. I think, like I said earlier, I could sit back and I could see how, the goals of my clientele align with the kingdom. And I could sit back, I could pray for it, I could see that happening. But I think the next step and the challenge, and to answer your question, is actually bringing light to, hey, this is actually what God wants too. And I'm realizing too, and especially with the science-heavy field, and I don't know if some of you will agree or disagree, but compared to, let's say, physicists or chemists, there's something about biologists that are actually pretty open to spirituality. Because the more they learn about the human body, the more they learn about how things work, it actually just points to God's really awesome creativity with how we work. So I think the challenge now is, practically speaking, just talking about my spirituality, especially when I talk with scientists, I talk with physician researchers, I talk with PIs, I talk with directors at biotech companies or pharma companies who lead R&D. The fact that I collaborate with them and they have a trust with me, the moment I bring up that I have a spirituality, they are either one, interested, or they never bring it up. I mean, especially since my wife is the administrator for Coast, they'll ask me, hey, what is they'll ask, are you married? What does your wife do? I'll say, oh, she's the administrator for our church. That right there is already an entryway. If they ask a question more about it, then we'll talk about it. And then they tend to either be interested or not, and that's it. But now whenever I collaborate with them, they know that that's another side of me, that I actually have something bigger than either profit, or there's actually something spiritual underlying that's driving that goal. And now that conversation's open, they know that about me, and nothing crazy has happened, but just the fact that that's open there, and they know that, and it's open knowledge.
Very cool. Thanks so much, June. Let's give June a hand. Yeah, a snapshot from the workplace. Appreciate it, June. And, I think June may have a gift of faith, or I don't often hear, the biology community, the hard science community is really open to faith. That's not the New York Times narrative about the biology community. So there's different narratives about the sort of hard sciences, particularly the life sciences, particularly biology in a town. Our town is like a world leader in the life sciences, right? We are one of the world capitals of biology. It's really cool just to even have that faith coming out of June. And I hope that sort of faith, if you just heard that, I hope if you're around the biology community, it's worth just allowing that to be sticky for us and to challenge the narrative, because we could easily, if you're not in that community, it can feel like, oh yeah, those are folks who are on the other team from faith. Biology, partly because of Richard Dawkins and others, has just become associated in certain circles with a whole different kind of narrative. So we want to live into the story where, hey, biology and the life sciences, it's just a place of openness right now. It's just a place where God is moving and wants to move. So thanks so much, June. All right. Before we get into Genesis 3, and as we start to look at the shadow side of work, I want to introduce you to one of my old friends this morning from my 20s, back when news was delivered on paper. Some of you you never had that happen at your home, but news used to come in papers, and there used to be a comic section rather than memes or the gram or whatever, wherever you go for your sort of comic relief in the day. It used to come in papers, and on Sundays, I used to always look forward to Dilbert, and I used to wonder if Catbert, the evil human resources director, would actually be in the newspaper. Here's just three slices of one of my old friends. Catbert says, "My job in human resources is to instill in you a permanent feeling of inadequacy. Your only hope for feeling good about yourself is to work feverishly to boost company profits. If you work all weekend for free, I am willing to call you adequate on a temporary basis. I'll take it, Dilbert says. Okay, two more. Kat Burt, and this one says actually, Kat Burt, evil human resources director. The mandatory unpaid overtime is immoral. It's destroying the quality of life, says the employee. Alice, companies are designed to maximize stockholder value, not employee happiness. Maybe the head of human resources should be a human. Privately, I refer to myself as the director of disgruntled cat toys. All right, a couple more. Kat Burt, evil human resources director. Actually, I think this is the last one. The employees have too much time off. It must be stopped. I summon the demons of darkness to assist me. Eliminate sick days. Make them use vacation days while they're ill and call it a time bank. It's playful. It's cruel. I like it. All right, Kat Burt, evil human resources director. Now, in my 20s, this was comic relief, and that's hilarious, and sort of in the big company world of middle management. Some of us work in big company worlds with middle management. Some of us work in small startups that don't have a Kat Burt. Some of us work independently or for firms that are really thriving. But I realized as I moved out of my 20s and did more pastoral work and prayed with and talked with people, I realized how many people right in our congregation and right in San Diego had experienced an HR person, experienced a workplace where a boss asked them to say something fraudulent or untrue. How many people had experienced discrimination? I remember the first time someone told me, and this was a man actually to my shock, that they had been pursued, that they had been subject to a sexual advance by a person in authority in the workplace, and it was a man. I just didn't know that there was harassment of males in the workplace. And then I've heard, just a number of women who have experienced, abusive or other types of work environments and realize that work very often can be far less than life-giving. And the reason Kat Burt is so funny is that it touches a side of our lives that many of us can relate to at some point, and maybe some of us relate to presently. Well, this morning we're going to look at the fall. We're going to look at Genesis 3. One of the things we saw over the last couple weeks, and Tim Hare, a guest speaker, spoke last week, and then 2 weeks ago from Genesis 2, is that God is designed to work for good. That right in the beginning of Genesis 2, verse 15, God places humans in the garden. He places the man in the garden, the Bible says, to work and to care for it. And before the fall, before sin enters into the world, there's this good intention that our lives would be full of redemptive, life-giving work. And we see that even in Genesis 1 that God is repeatedly described as a working God, a creating God. And so unlike many other worldviews, the Bible paints work as a gift, as something that's really inherently good because it comes from God. And at the same time in Genesis 3, we get this window into the brokenness of our work life. So let's pray and look at the Bible together. Lord, we thank you for your word. And Lord, would you shape us this morning as we read your word? Lord, would you unbind anything that's just held our minds and our worldviews? Lord, would you release us from any kind of lies that have taken hold of our thinking or our hearts, Lord, or even our desires? Lord, I ask that you'd pour out your Spirit. And Holy Spirit, we invite you to speak just in your small whispers into our heart where we need to hear you most. Holy Spirit, thanks for how you apply the Word of God to our hearts where we need it. And so, Lord, we invite you to have our way in our lives now. In Jesus' name, amen. All right. So I'm just going to read a slice of Genesis 3. Many of you have heard the story or know the story in Genesis 3 where Satan, the serpent, tempts Adam and Eve to eat the fruit that God has said, don't eat of that fruit. And they eat it. Eve eats it first. She offers it to Adam. And then Adam, in this wonderful, condensed, distilled slice of human diversion and blame shifting, says, the woman that you put here in the garden, she told me to eat it. Like, first of all, God, this is your fault. You put her here. Second of all, she told me, and then I ate it. And then God speaks curses to the serpent first, interestingly, sort of reverse order, and then Eve, and then Adam. And so we're just going to read what he says to Adam this morning. To Adam, he said, because you listened to your wife and ate from that tree about which I commanded you, you must not eat of it. Cursed is the ground because of you. Through painful toil, you will eat of it all the days of your life. It will produce thorns and thistles for you, and you will eat the plants of the field. By the sweat of your brow you will eat your food until you return to the ground, since from it you were taken, for dust you are, and to dust you will return. A couple weeks ago I said that Genesis 1 through 3 are short chapters. You can read them in 15 minutes, and at the same time, they are just one of the most revealing lenses through which to read all of life. So much of life is fundamentally explained at a very deep level. Our communication relationships, our alienation from God, our longing for God, our relationship with work. Much of our lives just all of a sudden become clear as we read them through the lens of Genesis 1 through 3. Well, this morning we're going to just walk through this passage briefly, but we're going to look at a work in a fallen world. We live in a fallen world. We live in a broken world. If you take one insight away from this passage, if we just sort of condense this passage down, it's that our working lives have been damaged by sin. They've been damaged by sin. It's not that work is inherently frustrating. It's not that work is a burden that's sort of a necessary evil that we try to get through. It's that God gave us a good gift to tend and to care for this world. And that by rebelling against Him, by going our own way, by taking charge of our own lives, by reaching for autonomy, by pressing against God's gracious and good commands, one of the sort of consequences of that is that our working lives have become frustrating. And so I want to look at just a few things about work in a fallen world, 3 things about work in a fallen world this morning. And the first is that work becomes fruitless. Work becomes fruitless. Let's check out Genesis 3 again. Cursed is the ground because of you. It will produce thorns and thistles. So we see God in the beginning creating a garden, and actually there's this beautiful picture. If you read Genesis 2 closely, the garden is bearing fruit, and actually God is working in the garden. He is there cultivating. It says He's producing the water, He's producing the trees that bear fruit. So there's a sense of God is at work in the garden, and then He puts the man there to work and to care for it. And so there's this picture of working together with God. That's the original design. And the original design that the fruit would be bearing in the garden, but also that the man would have a work of cultivating and caring, so that it's not just that you relax and have a party in the garden. Part of the goodness of human life is working together with the God who made us. But then we see this frustrated work. It becomes fruitless. Now, as a result of sin, work is going to feel fruitless. You're going to work hard, and what's going to be born is not this abundance of lush fruit. It's not going to be like a trip to the mango aisle in a Thai supermarket, which I strongly commend to you if you ever find yourself in Thailand. Just go to a mango aisle where there's kind after kind after kind of mango. I felt the first time I saw like a mango aisle, I thought I was going to heaven. This is what the stairway to heaven is really like. It's just mango after mango after mango, and each one is better than the next. There's just this infinite variety of luscious mangoes that they don't sell here, and they're virtually free. It was amazing. Anyway, that wasn't even in the message this morning, but it's going to produce thorns and thistles, not an abundance of fruit, thorns and thistles. And the reality is work can feel that way. My very first job was in a call center. My first real job, I should say, was in a call center. I was a student. And people told me, I had some friends who told me, you got to work, there's a call center, you should sign up. I'm like, I'm not going to be a telemarketer. They're Satan. I would never align myself with Satan. Now, this is before I knew Jesus, but I still, I don't want to align myself with Satan. No, I'm not going to be a telemarketer. But it was an HIV fundraising firm, and my friend said, well, it's more than minimum wage, and there's bonuses even if you don't get anybody to actually donate, there's bonuses, but if you don't get anybody to donate, it's more than minimum wage. And all the jobs I was sort of qualified for on campus with no job background were minimum wage. So I took it and I went to the call center, and in those days, landline, and you just call, hey, are you interested in donating to HIV research? No, click, 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 click. And pretty soon I just felt like I was getting beaten over the head. And after like one 8-hour shift, it was the most tired I've been like in my life. Like I would rather run distance. I would rather just be beaten all day than be rejected all day. It's just so hard. And went back, I think I worked 3 shifts a week and went back on it was like a Monday, Wednesday, Friday thing, went back on a Wednesday afternoon and just spent 8 hours calling people like, no, 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 no. And after a couple shifts, nobody had said yes. I got 0 donations. And they said, just keep trying. There's people who want to donate to HIV. Now, this tells you a little bit about the climate in the 80s. Should we donate to HIV research? No, no, no. And telemarketing, granted. But it was just nothing. And it felt so fruitless. Finally, after just 1 week, I started looking for other jobs. And a minimum wage cashier job came up. And I'm like, I'm on it. I will take less wages. And so after 3, I forget whether I worked 3 or 4 shifts, something like that, I never did get anyone to say yes. I was for the entire battery of calls, but it just felt so fruitless. It was so horrible. But I realized actually in talking to folks and even in my own experience of work through my whole life that even when you're in a vocation that you deeply feel is significant, many of us have days or seasons where we feel fruitless in the workplace. Many of us, even when we're right in the sweet spot and you're sure you should be doing what you're doing and you've got the job you want, you can wake up in the morning or at the end of a long week and just feel fruitless. And we want to diagnose that correctly. We want to diagnose fruitlessness in the workplace as part of the fall. It's part of the wreckage of running away from God, that work becomes fruitless. Second one, work becomes pointless. It's frustrating. You can just imagine almost feeling like there's no point to this. It's just thorns and thistles. Ecclesiastes sort of presses deeply into the frustrations of life, and it says this in chapter 2, so I hated life. Which turns out that's a really current expression. You didn't know that when you say, I'm hating life. That's Ecclesiastes right now. You could have a friend who comes home, they're super cynical. I am just hating life. You're quoting Ecclesiastes right there. Because the work that is done under the sun is grievous to me. All of it is meaningless. Have you ever felt that way? Man, I just put in a really hard day and it's meaningless. It's totally meaningless. I've noticed parenting teens, our kids will do really, really hard work. We built a fire pit in the backyard and we spent a few days a couple summers ago hauling granite. They will get cut hands and haul rocks all day. If they feel like there's meaning, they'll do it. But if a job doesn't have meaning, it's just, I can't get them to do it. I should have some kind of Jedi mind trick, I feel like. But the truth is, they don't want to do work this mean. I had one of our kids who's in the witness protection program this morning. We were going to a race together. I was trying to get him to wash his socks. Obviously, he's one of our male children. Now, you probably would have figured that out. Wash your socks. I'm just going to race in him. You need to wash your socks. I'm going to race him again. There's no reason to wash socks. I'm like, oh, yes, there is. Yes, there is. It's so other athletes don't die during the race. Like, people behind you will die. Like, they're in my shoes. Nobody can smell my socks. I'm like, they're stiff. He's like, as soon as I sweat, they unstiffen. I'm like, that's the most disgusting thing in the world. That's foul and filthy. Wash your socks. It's pointless, Dad. These are racing socks. All I do is run in them. I don't have to show them off. I'm like, they're filthy. They look dirty. He's like, no one cares how your racing socks look. Like, no, you have to wash your socks. And then I realized pretty much, I was getting really upset. I realized this is my identity. I'm your dad. People are going to know I'm your dad, and they're going to wonder why I didn't make you wash your socks. Like, ultimately, okay, I confess, this is about me and about my personal pride and going to a meet with a child who's actually these are race socks that have actually never been washed, right? So, I mean, they are foul. But I got to convince them of the larger narrative. There's a bigger picture point. When work becomes pointless, we don't want to do it. And the truth is, we're that way in the workplace. If you start to become convinced that your work is fundamentally pointless, it's depressing, isn't it? And actually, it eats away at your soul. And the reason it eats away at your soul is found in Genesis 1 through 3. That we are made for fruitful, purposeful, meaningful work. That is God's design. And when we are not engaged in meaningful work, it eats away not just at our day, but at our soul. And that's why things like anxiety and depression absolutely latch on to meaningless work. And that's why it's so important to grab on, as June just beautifully expressed this morning, sort of the design and the alignment of the industry he's in with the purposes of God. We need that sense of just meaning in the workplace. But finally, work becomes selfish. And one of the results of the fall is that we have this deep tendency to work for ourselves and for our own best interests and for our own good. Genesis 11, this plays out. If you just go downstream in Genesis, you can just feel in Genesis 1 through 11, you have the fall, and then you have the consequences of the fall just sort of snowballing and working out. As people moved eastward, they found a plain in Shinar and settled there, and they said to each other, "Come, let's make bricks and bake them thoroughly." And they used brick instead of stone and tar for mortar. And then they said, "Come, let us build for ourselves a city with a tower that reaches to the heavens, so that we may make a name for ourselves and not be scattered over the face of the earth." So that we may make a name for ourselves. And so here we just see human pride sort of coming together. That work becomes an avenue for pride. And the reality is, I think for many of us, the reason workplace environments get toxic, it's not just bad communication or ineffective strategic planning. It's actually sin. It's actually sin, isn't it? It's actually pride. It's CEOs who want to make many times what the lower level employees make. It's the sort of systematic sin that has gripped workplaces in America. I'll just give one example on this one. As I was praying over this, was sort of drawn to just wage inequality in the U.S. You probably can't read the graph, but white male wages are there on the left, and black male, if a white male makes $21 an average. So this is a 2016 Pew Research. So this is the latest data available in America right now. The average daily wage of a white male, 21, black male 15, Hispanic male 14, Hispanic female $12. And actually, right now, you may be aware that actually Asian Americans are making more men and women than white. But the interesting thing about this, there are two sociologists who controlled this study for education, controlled it for work experience, and controlled it for career. And those three controls narrowed the gaps, but the actual shape of the graph is identical. Meaning that black people with the same amount of experience, in the same job, with the same education level, are making a big step less. And for women, particularly black and Hispanic women, there's this tremendous wage inequality. And I say that to say that our workplaces, everywhere we work, there's a fundamental issue of the fall. There's a fundamental issue of human brokenness, of sin, of rebellion against God that's shaping, and the way it plays out is that the selfishness, ultimately, this is about people maximizing their own profits instead of paying people fairly, isn't it? We live in a world where workplaces are marred not just by lack of best practices. And this is where we need the Bible to give us like the real diagnosis. The real diagnosis is sin. I want to spend just a few minutes and then we'll move back into worship this morning. This is a little bit of the history of the wage inequality. I forgot to put up this graph. Just one note is that basically for blacks and Hispanics particularly, since 1980, but actually I looked it up. If you go back to 1965, the wage gap has almost not moved. I mean, it's just like a little difference since civil rights. Just a tiny difference. Like black women just slightly better, black men almost even. Hispanic men actually slightly less. And if you go all the way back to 1965, you see a little bump and then a little down, and you realize, wow, since civil rights, it feels like we've made a lot of progress, hasn't it? And when you look at the wage gap, you see, well, not really in wages, just a tiny amount. Well, over the next several weeks, we want to talk about moving into a new story for work. And we want to look at the ways that Jesus is transforming our workplace. I'm just going to sketch it this morning, but we'll press more into this over the next few weeks. Right in Genesis 3, right in the midst of God cursing the man and the woman, the Lord God says to the serpent, because you have done this, I will put enmity between you and the woman and between your offspring and hers. He will crush your head and you will strike his heel. This is often called the first gospel. Because in cursing the serpent, God's saying, you're going to have enmity, the serpent, there's going to be enmity between your offspring and hers. He's going to crush your head. That is the offspring of the woman, and you will strike his heel. But many take this as pointing right at Jesus, that ultimately the work of the enemy is going to be crushed by the work of Jesus on the cross. 1 John 3:8 says that the Son of Man appeared to destroy the work of the devil. And Jesus in Revelation 21, a verse I love, behold, I'm making everything new. Everything. I'm making everything new. And we want to think about that not only in terms of our souls and our character and everything about our lives, but our workplaces. I'm making everything new, transforming everything. So just working through the three sort of consequences of the fall in the workplace. Three things that I think just sort of are indicative of what Jesus is doing in the workplace. He's taking the workplace from being fruitless to fruitful. He's taking us from a narrative where work has become empty and where we're working hard and it's not bearing fruit, to a place where it's fruitful. Jesus says to all of his followers, you didn't choose me, but I chose you and appointed you so that you might go and bear fruit that will last. And over the next few weeks, we'll look at it. This is not, I think we miss it if we say this is just spiritual fruit. There's an element of bearing fruit for God's kingdom, but I think this very much takes hold of our working lives. And we'll press into that more. I want to read, I have permission from former member of Coast, actually Shannon McMahon is here this morning. Mike McMahon, some of you know him, made a post on Facebook yesterday that I thought was quite cool. And I'm just going to read it again. If he had been here, would have done a dual interview with June and Mike. But he's working this morning. He's a nurse. But this is a Facebook post from yesterday. I just met a woman at Sprouts who knew me by name. She told me that I had been her nurse while she was in the ER for drug-related issues. She said that I had impacted her by sharing my pastor's story with drug use and that she eventually went to Teen Challenge in Texas and is currently enrolled in seminary. I was blown away. As nurses and human beings in general, we never know if our good deeds bear fruit. This was an awesome reminder to keep fighting the good fight. For those of you in doubt, your actions will make a difference. One plants, one waters, another gathers in the harvest. We all play a part of bringing redemption on this earth. I thought that was a cool, many of you know, I'm not a major denizen of the Facebook world, but a cool post. And I think one way we bring the kingdom in sort of healthcare and as, for instance, nurses or doctors is just by doing our job well. But here's an example where Mike shared something with someone that years later turns out to have been transformative in that person's life. And it's, I think, part of seeing fruitfulness in the workplace is knowing that God, when we sow seeds in the workplace, they might bear fruit that we never would have imagined. And one of the cool things about the kingdom of God is how surprising the fruit is. And that as we're faithful to follow Jesus, the stories we share and the lives we live influence in ways that later come back and we find out, wait a minute, that bore fruit, that led to a changed life. Okay, so from fruitless to fruitful, from pointless to purposeful. From pointless to purposeful. I just sort of want to respin everything June just said. That from when we start seeing life from the eyes of the kingdom, we start realizing God's redemptive purpose in our life, in our workplace. In biotech, man, this is an industry that beats things like thyroid cancer. And if you've ever had a relative with cancer, you want to pray for and cheer on. Let's get the best minds doing everything they can. I'm looking at David Dimmick in genetics. Like, let's have people solve big problems so that family members can thrive. If you're a teacher and you're stewarding the wisdom and the virtue and the character and the knowledge of the next generation in America, Steve, do your job well. If you're a teacher, teach well. Marketing. Do you know that marketing, which might not be thought of the most godly profession, you've all heard this word evangelist, right? When we think of evangelist, Billy Graham or something like that, do you know evangelist just meant marketer in the ancient world? It was the people who announced a sale on bread. If you were the town crier who just yelled out in a loud voice, if you had a loud voice, I could have been an evangelist in the ancient world, just got a loud voice. If you're loud, you stood at the gates like, cheap bread. That's what an evangelist was. That was a professional evangelist. You would announce the things, hey, good news, everybody, the boat's coming in, grain for the winter, lumber on the way, bring your wheelbarrows out, there's lumber. That's an evangelist. But what I take that to mean is, and then the Bible sort of took over evangelist as one who lets other people know about the good news in Jesus. But here's where I'm going with marketing, that the redemptive purpose of something like marketing is to let people know good news that's breaking out in the world. There's products that give life. There's redemptive purpose for every field, and we want to tap into what's God's redemptive purpose in order to align with that. And then finally, a verse from 1 Corinthians, so whether you eat or drink or whatever you do, do it all for the glory of the Lord. And we'll look at that verse in a couple weeks. And then I'll just close here. We want to move from being selfish to worshipful in the workplace. And sort of a key verse for the whole series, this is the Message translation of Romans 12:1. Take your everyday, ordinary, your sleeping, eating, going to work, and walking around life, and place it before God as an offering. Place it before God as an offering. I want to close with just a 2-minute story, and then we're going to have a fun time of worship. There's a man, some of you remember Randy Ingerman, a member of Coast for a long time. He was a theoretical physicist, got his PhD from Berkeley, a top theoretical physicist. Not long after I first met him, he talked to me about the day he realized he probably wasn't going to win the Nobel Prize. I was like, wow. I mean, not everybody gets to have that realization. I've never wondered if I was going to win a Nobel Prize. Randy was like legitimately wondering, am I going to win the Nobel Prize for physics? And I realized, probably not. I'm like, wow, you're like, that's amazing. And he prayed and he felt like God was calling him to write Christian science fiction. And I was just smart enough. He's in our home group. We're like, don't quit your day job, Randy. Don't quit your day job, man. You are super good at physics. You're super, super duper good at math. Like Christian science fiction. He said, I want to write time travel science fiction. Like, Randy, do that on the side, man. Do that after work. Now, I love the sciences. This is not a call at all to step out of hard sciences if you're in science. But as he prayed, he was feeling like God was calling him to change careers. And he was finding physics just emptier and emptier and emptier and emptier. And so he started writing. And as he was writing, the first few times he showed me some chapters because I was a writing major. He's like, what do you think of this? I'm like, time travel. I'm like, this is pretty weird. It's like Christian science fiction. It's Christian time travel, man. This is unusual. It's kind of gripping, but I was just seeing short slides. And then as he started to write, I'm like, wow, he's got a gift for this. Turns out he's good at this. And he worked on it and crafted it. And then he started producing a series of novels. Some of you remember the Left Behind novels. Do you guys remember those? Like some of the best-selling works like for decades in America of any type of fiction. 2 of his first 3 novels won awards over Left Behind as the other competitor. And it turned out he became and is just one of the best-known Christian science fiction authors in the nation, and has a community globally now, put him in touch with all kinds of people from different faiths, all kinds of amazing faith conversations, and has connected him around the world in these life-giving conversations around his creative writing. And now, but here's, as Randy's friend, not as a pastor, and again, not a call to leave the hard sciences at all this morning, but what I noticed as a friend is the change in his face. From, man, worship just seems dreary, to being absolutely lit up and excited and having a sense of thriving. And when work becomes worship, our whole life experiences the benefit. It transforms us emotionally when work is authentically an act of worship. When you understand that this, what I'm doing today, is an offering to you, Jesus, it transforms our whole reality. Let's all stand. Worship team, if you guys could come on up with Marla. We're going to do a couple songs instead of one song this morning, so we're going to intentionally go over because Marla's amazing. If you need to go, you're welcome to, but we want to make space for just the gift of worship that Marla brings this morning. So we'll do a couple songs, and then we'll just have a chance for anybody to get prayer who wants prayer. Just as we're in a place of worship, I want to just allow everybody to stay in a place of worship. I also want to honor the people watching our kids. So we have a value for both allowing God to move and giving space for God to move in our lives, but also loving our teachers who are caring for kids. So if you're a parent, could you pretty much run over to the kids area and get your kids? We want to make sure that we're honoring there. And I know different people come in with different time expectations. Let's hold hands across the aisles. This is really just our ministry time this morning in the presence of the Lord. We do close every week just by holding hands across the aisles. We are a diverse community, grateful to just be in the presence of the Lord together. And that last song, it's really our heart cry. Spirit, break out, break the walls down. King Jesus, we lift you high. We want to see revival, Lord. We want to see your kingdom here. That's the cry of our heart, Lord, in every part of our lives, in every workplace in the city, and every neighborhood and corner of our city and this nation and in all the nations of the world. So we love you, Jesus. In your name we pray. Amen. God bless you guys. You know, if you want to go, you're welcome to. We may just stay in a place of worship. I think this will be our ministry time this morning. Sometimes we have people come up front, but I just feel like we're really in the presence of the Lord. So we'll just continue some worship. If you're headed out, God bless you. Have a great week, and we'll just kind of wind out in the presence of the Lord this morning singing.